So today's Tea Tuesdays is going to be on the power of powers of attorney. Again, it is a tremendous part of people's financial picture that most people, even people that have wills and trusts and they have everything done right, even if they got a power of attorney done, you'll see why it's so important to have these things updated and done the right way and validated in order for things to work out the way you want. So, as always, we have basic disclosures. All of our presentations are not constituting of tax, financial, legal, or accounting advice. Specifically, we're talking about legal stuff today. So, I like to preface this that I'm not an attorney. We'll go into a little bit more about me and prove most strategies and what we do. But again, you should contact an attorney when it comes to specific legal advice, issues, and things of that nature. Um, so who we are again, Prudent Wealth Strategies, myself, Stefan Bellholm, my lovely wife, Michelle. We are tax strategists, estate planning specialists. We're also trustees. So a lot of the stuff that we talk about in the Tax and Estate Academy is about trust, estate planning, different tax structures, trust structures. And we train investors, business owners, tax firms. We work with a lot of high net worth families, affluent families as well, to educate them on how to implement these different things. You'd be surprised how many people that have a lot of money, have a lot of assets, things you think they'd have their stuff put together, but they don't. And it's because a lot of this stuff can be confusing, it can be daunting, it can be intimidating and overwhelming. And that's really why we put this program together to take all of the legalese and all of the gibberish and jargon and stuff that makes people not want to move forward. Just break it down, ABC, one, two, three. This is how it works. If you want to get into the weeds, want to get technical, hey, we have the CPAs, the attorneys, the tax attorneys, estate planning attorneys that can go there with you and implement these things. But it's really important to kind of understand these things before you move forward. And so that's what we do. Our process is education, evaluation, and execution. So, it's about, again, understanding, being educated on things, not just YouTube University. There's a lot of information out there online, on Google, on YouTube, whatever, and it's fine. But most of it is either BS, convoluted, super complex, and, someone on the other end is just trying to sell you something. And there's nothing wrong with that. We got to make money. I got to make money as well. We have products and services that we offer as well. But it's more important that you get educated and learn how these things work. You understand, you take an evaluation, and then you execute. A lot of people like to just get into the doing, into the execution, but we really want to focus and start on the education. So the agenda is we're going to go into the five components of what we call authorization documents. The focus is obviously powers of attorney. We'll be starting with that. But really and truly, there's a lot more than just having healthcare and financial power of attorney. It's about giving someone the agency or authorization to handle your affairs again when you're not able to. We'll go into some, use cases and client stories and things like that, and then we'll talk about how to get these documents set up for you and your family members. We have some people on the call that are team members. And if you're a team member and you have not taken advantage of this, you need to get this done because this is one of the things that we provide for the people that are part of our program. So a lot of you that are not part of the team member program, we will talk about that later about how to join. Super simple, super affordable. But at the end of the day, it's about understanding how these things work. So when we think about estate planning, this is typically what people think when it comes to estate planning. Hey, mom and dad or spouse or husband or someone, a loved one has passed away. We got to, go through their stuff. We got to sell the house. We got to handle, their taxes and all these different financial things. And that is true. There is a component of estate planning that this is that pertains to this, right? But we also want to focus on what happens if you don't die, right? What happens when you're not dead, when you're living on God's green earth? A lot of people do not think that way. They just think worst case scenario. And obviously we want to plan for that, but there's a lot of things that happen. I live in the Raleigh-Durham area and, we travel through, the local highways and byways. And, when you're on 440, almost every other day, what do you see? Accidents, right? Really bad, severe accidents. And some of those are fatal, but a lot of times they're not fatal. Someone's in critical condition. And when you think of those things, you see those things, me and Shelly are always, when we drive by those accident sites, we say, oh, we got to say a little prayer or whatever because they look really bad. But the reality is, if these people don't have their affairs in order, there's things that have to happen, even though that person has not passed away. And so we really have to start with the intention that life happens, right? As the young people say, life be lifing, right? Life, things happen. And we have to, be intentional when it comes to estate planning and asset protection when it comes to that. Um, so what are the things that can happen? So we talked about accidents, car accidents, can be crazy, but a lot of people can have illnesses, strokes, heart attacks, cognitive disorders, dementia. My grandfather, I'll never forget, that was one of his, he passed away, what, 97, so gosh, almost 30 years ago. And he had senile dementia. And right before, it really got bad, it was really devastating for my mom. He was cursing at her and screaming at her and saying acting like he didn't know her, and it was just crazy. But these things happen, and I can't recall. I was very young at that time whether or not they had these legal documents in order. But I can only imagine, just the on top of the emotional damage and things that are going on, you have financial consequences and healthcare decisions and things like that. So it's not just, hey, accidents, it's, illnesses, and they can happen very quickly, like again, heart attack or stroke, or something more slow over time, like a cognitive disorder, like Alzheimer's, dementia, things of that nature. So when these things happen, that person at that point can't make those decisions, right? And so they need someone to advocate on their behalf. And again, life goes on. So when that person is in that position, bills still need to be paid, right? The mortgage company doesn't care that you've been in an accident, right? They still need the mortgage to be paid. The card company, the light bills, the phone bills, they don't care. All of these things have to be managed and facilitated for, on top of medical decisions. We'll get more into the healthcare aspect. If you're a business owner, there's going to be business decisions. And we've seen a lot of clients that, especially during COVID, they had businesses, and some clients we've had that, got COVID, they were out, some of them near death, they didn't die, but they needed to have these things done, and set up ahead of time, to be taken care of. Pay vendors, pay employees, all those things. So at the end of the day, when these things happen, someone has to handle your affairs. And that someone can't be you because you're obviously incapacitated. And so that's when these authorization documents, this is really where the rubber meets the road. And in our country, the country that we live in, good old US of A, how it works pretty much everywhere you go, doesn't matter if you're going to the hospital or you're going to the bank or you're going here or there, what are they going to tell you? Can I see the paperwork? What paperwork do you have? So you can imagine and think and guess and say all these different things that, hey, I want Johnny to take care of this, or I want my nephew or my husband or XYZ to handle these things. But if it's not documented, if it's not on paperwork, it means diddly squat. And that's the real deal. So without having, these provisions in place, I like to let people know up front, you're going to have to deal with courts, lawyers, and judges, which is really money, time, and stress. Courts, lawyers, and judges going through the legal system, going through the rudimentary system that we have here is a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of stress. So if you want to avoid that, you need to be proactive. So the final outcome of getting all of these things put together is asset protection. We'll talk a little bit more in detail about why having a power of attorney can be the biggest form of asset protection that you have. But peace of mind, obviously not having to guess what's going to happen here, or, deal with courts and, delays. And there's no confusion because you've documented ahead of time, hey, I want XYZ to do this for me. I want XYZ to do that for me. So we're going to go into the authorization documents. We're going to dive into the meat and potatoes here. Healthcare power of attorneys, financial power of attorneys, living will, HIPAA waiver, and the letter of intent to return. This is a big one right here, this last one, that a lot of people don't realize, and we'll get into more in detail of why it's such an important document. So, first of all, has anyone here, and you can just unmute yourself, has anyone ever done or put together a power of attorney or had someone put a power of attorney together for them? Anyone? Matthew says, yes, he has. He just did one last year for a real estate deal. Okay, awesome. Yeah. And a lot of people will talk about, how POAs typically work on a real estate transaction. Those are what are called limited POAs. But basically, again, POA is just giving someone the written authorization to represent you or act on your behalf. And a POA is a contract. Okay, we talk a lot in the T program about the importance of contracts, understanding contracts from trusts to life insurance to liquidity provisions, all these different things. But a POA is a contract. It's a contract between two parties where you're saying, hey, I want to have XYZ do whatever for me. Okay. But that's the core of what a POA is. The financial POA is what gives the individual the authority to take care of financial and legal matters when you're not able to. And this can be like the gentleman said here for real estate deals. A lot of times people will do this. Hey, I'm closing on a property. We moved out. We moved to another state, so I'm not able to do something. And that's that capacity. But also, God forbid, you're incapacitated, you're comatose, whatever. You need decisions to be made. Um, so this is what the document that allows that person to handle those financial and legal matters, but it pertains only to things that are typically not in a trust. And we'll get into this in a little bit. But if you have a trust already set up, that's typically when your successor trustee is going to handle those affairs. But it's only for assets and property that are in a trust. So anything that's not in a trust, if you have a regular bank account, Social Security, 401ks, things like that. Again, legal matters, business things. This is where you're going to need a power of attorney, financial power of attorney. Insurance companies, that sort of stuff. So what the POA does is you have a few different provisions. You have a springing provision with the POA, which basically says, hey, this only goes into effect when needed at a specific date, specific time, or a specific event, i.e., you're incapacitated, right? You're not able to make decisions because a physician or a medical provider says that you can't, right? So that's when it springs into effect. And then the durable provision basically says it lasts until you're able to start making decisions for yourself. So once it kicks in, it's going to endure. That's another term that they use for enduring power of attorney. They use that more in England. But it's going to continue to provide that person, that agent or attorney, in fact, the ability, the authorization to handle your affairs. Healthcare power of attorney essentially does the same thing, but it does this for healthcare related decisions. And this is something that's really important when we start talking about more, advanced directives and things of that nature. But hey, if something happens to you, paying the bills and all that stuff, that's one thing. But communicating with providers, with pharmacies, with insurance companies, all of that stuff, this is where the healthcare power of attorney is going to take place. And obviously, it's there to prevent family arguments and court proceedings and things of that nature. I come from a family of mainly nurses. And a lot of people in the medical field, but a lot of my family members are in the nursing profession. My sister's a nurse, my mom's a nurse, a lot of nurses in my family, and your family too, Shelley, right? Your mom was a nurse.
Well, my family is your family.
So,
So yeah, your mother-in-law was a nurse.
right. So,
My grandmother.
uh, so a lot of nurses in our families and in the medical field, I can tell you that a lot of times when you're going to hospitals, you're dealing with doctors and nurses and things of that nature. A lot of times, most of the time, it's a mess, and they're really stressed, and there's time constraints, and there's different things they have to deal with, but there's also a legal component. So if you don't have a healthcare power of attorney, what will happen a lot, we've seen this happen with certain clients is, hey, you may be able to skate through without having that documentation with a nurse or a doctor every once in a while. But when it comes to administrators, when you deal with the hospital administrators, um, they're going to need to have that document. And we've seen cases where mom and dad, mom's in an accident or dad's in an accident. Actually had a case last year. This gentleman was in an accident. Wife didn't want to deal with the stuff, so the daughter came in. Daughter's an attorney. Daughter tried to go through and finagle, and guess what? Wasn't able to do anything because she was dealing right with the hospital administrator. Hospital administrator said, "Where's your healthcare power of attorney?" And they didn't have it,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
and
So,
you may be touching on this next, Stefan. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the biggest surprise for healthcare power of attorney is when it comes to children going to college
oh
and getting
yeah.
injured. So I'll let you elaborate on that. But that shocks a lot of people when they think of healthcare power of attorney. Initially, they think of just older, your parents, somebody old.
Hmm.
But the truth of the matter is, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this, Stefan, but there was a family in the neighborhood that had a horrible accident. It was fatal for a child in the neighborhood at the lake this past weekend. And
Wow.
and some other family members were injured as well. But you can go ahead and touch on
Didn't know.
when your kids children go to college and the younger people.
Wow, I didn't know that. We'll talk about that
You have to look
afterwards.
on the Facebook
Wow,
neighborhood.
yeah, we have a Facebook group in our neighborhood, and yeah, things get posted there all the time. But yeah, no, when we'll touch on this. But yeah, to Michelle's point, no, when we think again of things happening, right? Things happen, life be lifing. It's everybody. It's accidents, injuries, cognitive disorders. They don't restrict you based on your age or your ethnicity or anything like that. So this can happen to anybody. But the point I really wanted to focus on here is the importance of having this stuff, again, from a stress standpoint. You're already going through a very stressful time if someone is incapacitated. And so the importance of having this stuff is to avoid any other types of stress, right? You already got the emotional stress and you're thinking about that person's health. And now you're trying to just help that person facilitate, hey, we need this, they need this medication, that medication. And in the case of the client we had last year, the daughter really knew the dad was diabetic, and so the daughter knew what type of medication he needed and this and that, and the hospital didn't know, and so she was really just trying to help, but she didn't have the authority to do that. Long story short, everything ended up working out, but it could have been much worse. And so we want these things to be done ahead of time. So same thing, the springing POA only goes into effect when it's needed, and that durable provision of that POA lasts until you're able to make decisions. So once you're able to make decisions, then that POA no longer needs to have authority and things of that nature. So the POA document, again, it's a contract. You have two parties, basically the principal, that's you or whoever the person is that's getting assigning the powers of attorney. Just a note to keep in mind, a lot of times when people think or they use the word powers of attorney, they think of an attorney, but the person that's being the power of attorney is the actual document. Okay, so the POA is the document itself. The person that's acting on your behalf is what's called an agent or attorney in fact. So a lot of times people say, oh, that we have powers of attorney. No one has powers of attorney. You have the document and you're the agent acting on that person's behalf, who is the principal. So that's kind of how this works in a nutshell. But that agent, that attorney in fact, has to operate within fiduciary duties. It's no different than being an executor of a will or being a trustee to a trust. You have to act in the principal's best interest. You have to manage money and property carefully. And you have to keep, and this is a big thing. We'll talk about the Uniform Powers of Attorney Act in a little bit. But this is a big thing because a lot of people are scared about abuse when it comes to powers of attorney. I would say that's one of the main reasons that prevents people from getting this stuff done is, hey, if something happens to me, I don't want someone to abuse me. And that's a legitimate concern. But once someone is an actual fiduciary for you, is an agent in fact, attorney in fact, they have to keep their stuff separate from yours. They can't commingle assets and money and all that stuff, and they have to keep good records. And we'll talk about why that's so important. Now, the agent, like Agent Smith, you can pick whoever agent you want, but it obviously has to be someone that you trust fully. because obviously they're making decisions for you. And because of that, that agent or attorney, in fact, has to be over the age of 21. Okay. Obviously, it should be someone that understands your values, but most importantly, that has to be someone that's willing to serve. And a lot of times people make these decisions, especially married couples, and we'll get into this and about married couples. We deal a lot with people that are married and people that have, non-traditional, arrangements, they're domestic partners. Either way, it may not be your partner or your spouse that you want to serve as that agent or attorney of fact because maybe they're not the best at handling finances. Maybe they don't, they're not comfortable with talking to advisors and real estate agents and all these different things. And maybe they may not be just in a good emotional state to serve, right?
They don't
Because
do well under stress, under stressful situations. So maybe there's a child. We also deal with a lot of blended families. Maybe there's an adult child or something that's, in a better headspace to deal with it.
100%.
Or a
And
sister or brother.
yeah. And
Mhm.
that's why it's important to have backups. And with our power of attorney process, the way it works is you set up a primary person, but you're allowed to have up to three backups. And that's super important because you never know when someone may not want to serve. Um, so who you might want, again, someone probably detail oriented, someone that's good with numbers, maybe not as nerdy as this guy here,
New
but
picture.
but someone that's that's okay with talking to advisors, to professionals, and things of that nature, dealing with insurance companies, and a lot of people, and I meet people that are engineers that are really detail oriented. They say, and we have very kind of conversations. Hey, Stefan, I don't want to do this. I'd rather have someone else do it. So those are super important things. But I think the biggest thing, and this is one thing that people don't take into consideration is, can this person even manage their own affairs?
Right.
Can they handle their own bills? Do they, how's their credit? How's their banks like? The last thing you want to do is entrust your stuff over to someone that can't even handle their own stuff. So that's just very super important to kind of understand as you go through this decision-making process,
That's right. And do they have their powers of attorney set up? God forbid
right?
something to happen to them. So, it's a good thing if you're considering someone and they don't, then, get them to do it alongside you.
Yeah. So let's talk about stale powers of attorney, like the stale bread that you see here. Because a lot of times people will tell me, hey, we got our POAs done years ago. We got it done, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we got our trust and will and all these things done. And that's great. And again, I meet a lot of people that have all these legal documents set up the right way. I like to remind people all the time that if you look throughout, the $1 million celebrities like Prince and Michael Jackson and Robin Williams, when they all passed away, guess what? Their estate was in shambles because you assume that they had everything intact because they had so much money. But that being said, stale powers of attorney. What is this? Well, if you got your power of attorney done 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, and it needs to go into to play. Hey, mom or dad or your son or whatever, we'll get into that. They're incapacitated, or we need to service power of attorney. Okay, great. You go, you take the documents. First thing they're going to do is look at it, look at the dates, look at everything. Oh, this was done 10 years ago, right? We're not going to honor this. And a lot of people are shocked. And the reason why is because the banks, first of all, banks and financial institutions, they have a lot of laws, a lot of regulations, a lot of legal things that they have to abide by. And so at the end of the day, what they're trying to do is CYA or CTA. They got to cover their you know what's, right? So they're constantly in a position to make sure that they're doing not only right by the account holder, but also working in accordance with legal with federal
Yeah, they're
laws and things of that
compliant.
nature.
Mhm.
And so when it comes to these things, their standpoint is, hey, does this reflect your current wishes? I mean, maybe 10 years ago, 5 years ago, you got this done, but maybe, I've talked to people, hey, we got our POA done 10 years ago. Okay. Have you remarried? Yeah. Have you divorced? Yeah. Okay. Who is that new person, the POA? Oh, crap, we haven't done that, right? We haven't updated those things. So it's very much to see, hey, are the wishes that they had 10 years ago current and congruent with the wishes that most likely are right now? And most of the time it's not. And so that's why still powers of attorneys exist. And a lot of banks, financial institutions, and other places don't honor POAs that are done, that were done, too long ago. So one of the things we recommend people, especially when they use our program, is to update your POA every year. Some attorneys will tell you every 2, 3 years, but the really smart attorneys that we talk to say update it every single year. It may be tedious, but it takes 5 minutes, takes 5, 10 minutes, just reevaluate things because life changes. People move, right? Your agent's availability. Hey, your kid was your power of attorney, but now they moved to the West Coast. They're in California or they're overseas. They can't be the power of attorney, right? They're gonna have to fly back home, fly back to where you are to handle those things. And is that going to be feasible? So that's just something super important to kind of understand with this. All right. Now let's get into Medicaid spend down. We'll get into why this is so important because a lot of times people will say, "Oh, what does this have to do with, powers of attorney and all that stuff?" Well, first thing I want to explain is for people that have not or aren't familiar with what a Medicaid spend down is basically when you become incapacitated or whatever, cognitive disorder, whatever, and you need long-term care, you need nursing home benefits. Um, Basically, you have three options. You either have to have long-term care insurance to pay for that, which a lot of people don't have, but we'll talk about that. We talk about that a lot in our program, different ways to set that up. But nursing home care can be, 5, 10, I've seen up to $15,000 a month in California. So it can be very expensive. So if you don't have long-term care, you either have to pay out of pocket. That's the second option if you have the money. And some people have the money, some people don't. But if you don't have the money, the state's going to say, hey, you need to take all of your assets, your real estate, your investments, you need to spend all of that first, and then we're going to, once you spend all that stuff down, then then we'll pay towards that, towards your long-term care costs, your nursing home costs. And so that's essentially what a Medicaid spend down is. And what a lot of people don't realize is that if you don't have the right documents in place, some of your assets, specifically your primary residence, can be sold or you're forced to sell before Medicaid kicks in. And a lot of people don't realize that. Now, every state is different. So when I'm explaining this, Florida is different than North Carolina, where we live, is different than California, New York. So they're all different. There's differences in state laws. But generally speaking, the way it works is whatever, if you have a homestead exemption, I know in Florida it's basically unlimited, but you still need to have this provision. And the provision is what's called an intent to return. And this is something that a lot of people, again, they have a trust, they have a will, they have all these different things, but they don't have this document in place. And essentially what this says is it declares that in the event you're institutionalized, you're in a nursing home, whatever, that you intend to come back to your home and basically take care of yourself if you're able to. Um, and so this is what gives your home that exemption because typically, again, generally speaking, your primary residence is an exempt asset for Medicaid. So from a Medicaid standpoint, in pretty much most states, they can't make you, sell your primary residence. If you have any other real estate, investment property, things like that, that's on the table because that's not your primary residence. So anything else, stocks, bonds, all that stuff, they can make you sell all that. But your primary residence, they can't make you sell that. But you have to have this provision because if you don't, Medicaid may require you to sell your home to cover your medical costs. And that's something that a lot of people that have put everything together don't understand. So this is a super, super important part to make sure, again, you're protecting your assets because if you don't have to sell your home, obviously that's more wealth that stays in your family. It can get passed down. But if you do, it's not. So it's just something super, super important. HIPAA release. HIPAA release, you know anything about healthcare again? We have family members, people in our family that are, in the nursing industry and stuff like that. And obviously, me starting my career in insurance, HIPAA is all about protecting the consumer, right? Protecting the privacy of the consumer when it comes to medical information. And again, as the healthcare power of attorney or agent, attorney in fact, um, you need to be able to deal with physicians and insurance companies when it comes to doing the job that you signed up to do. But you have to have this release form that says, hey, not only did they allow you to, talk about, make medical decisions, but that we can release information to you as well. So that's what the HIPAA release, it's also called HIPAA authorization or HIPAA waiver is for as well.
Again, important for your children that are 18 years plus, that you have that.
Yeah.
Because they
So
can get injured, they can get injured on campus, at school, wherever they are. They could be in their early 20s. They're considered an adult, whether you think they're able to make the decisions for themselves or not. You're no longer able to unless you have these certain provisions in place.
100%. And what I'll echo too is that a lot of times when we think of, our kids, we have kids ourselves and kids in college, it's, hey, they're adult now, they can kind of handle some things. But the reality is, and we know every kid is different, our kids are going to need us. They're going to need our help after they turn 18, right? Some much longer than that, some for life. But the reality is they're going to need someone to help advocate for them. And if you don't have these documents in place, you're SOL. You could be, we have a lot of clients. We'll talk about, some of our upcoming workshops when it comes to college planning and stuff like that. We have a lot of clients. We're showing them different strategies to, pay less for education and reduce taxes. But they're sending their kids off to college and they don't even realize that they need to have healthcare power of attorney. They need to have medical power of attorney. They need to have FERPA. There's all these different things that, hey, if something happens while your kid's on campus, and it happens all the time, every single year, there's some story, some kid getting hazed or this or that, right? The schools don't have to tell you anything. They don't have to release anything. And if you need to advocate for them or whatever, you can't do that because they're age of majority. So it's just super, super important to have these documents for every adult in your family. So whether it's yourself, whether it's your kids that are over 18, even their mid 20s. Hey, if they're not married yet, they don't have a spouse, hey, get this done. You can always make changes, they can always amend things later on, but get this stuff done because if you don't have it, courts, lawyers, judges, money, time, and stress. We don't want to have to deal with that. So, last thing is what we call the advanced medical directives or living will. Okay. And what this is essentially one of the things that this pops up a lot is if you have to get a colonoscopy. Okay. I just turned 40, so got dinged from my insurance company. Hey, you need to go get a colonoscopy. And we're working on that right now. But one of the things that they say is, hey, do you have a living will? They send you the documentation to get this set up because essentially what this does is, and it's very scary to think about this, but it directs a medical professional, and a lot of times this will be the healthcare POA, but it directs medical professionals on how you want medical care to be administered for terminal illnesses. So we're talking about end of life, you're comatose, something's happened and something went wrong. And so that was the whole thing with the colonoscopies because sometimes things can go sideways. And so it's part of the medical providers and hospitals and everything trying to cover their butts, but it's also a provision to basically say, hey, if something happens, something that's kind of outside of our control or whatever, we need to know how you want things to be administered. And so this is when you start having conversations about, hey, if something happens, do you keep me on life support for a certain amount of time? Do you pull the plug? If I need to get food from a tube, pain relief, all these different things. How do I want those things done? And different people have different ideas as far as what this means. Some people are super extreme. Hey, I don't, if something happens, just pull the plug immediately. Some people, hey, give me some time. Some people are like, I don't know, right? And that's a legitimate concern. But it's important to kind of understand how this works, and get it put together and have it documented, because otherwise, guess what? Your family is going to be put in a position to have to, negotiate and talk to doctors, maybe get the court involved. That was the whole, Terry Schiavo case and different big national cases like that. But it's because, that you don't have these things in place. And so this is just a super important thing to have. And essentially, again, like I said, for the most part, the healthcare POA is going to be the same person, that is head of the medical directive. But again, a lot of times the POA is not present. Hey, my kid or whatever, they moved overseas or out of the country. We need to make decisions right now. We can't wait 2, 3 weeks or a few days. These decisions have to be made relatively quickly. And so the POA basically is gonna jump in when that POA is either not present or they're not able to make those decisions, because you've laid out, hey, legally, this is what I want, this is what I want to happen to me. And a lot of local hospitals have these documents as well. So one of the things we recommend with clients is not only get it done through our portal on our system, but go to your local hospital and get those things done as well. Just so they're notified ahead of time. And again, it takes the pain and the emotional stress out of, having to make those decisions. So, a few key points just to kind of wrap up here with a few different things is the principal, number one, has to have capacity when those powers are delegated. So the reason why this is so important is because you need to get this stuff done before you're incapacitated. Once you're incapacitated, we cannot set up healthcare, financial power of attorney, living will, all that stuff. It's out the door because you're not making those decisions now. So it has to get done ahead of time. And we don't know what's going to happen from one day to the next. And that's why it's so important to get this stuff done right away. You can always change the stuff later on, but get it done now. Don't wait. Second thing is that the powers only go into effect when it's signed. So even if you have power of attorney is done, it has to be signed, it has to be documented and notarized and witnessed for it to be valid, right? A lot of people have powers of attorney. They went to some cheap online site and got some powers of attorney, but it's not actually valid because it wasn't done. And it probably doesn't have the provisions that it needs to have. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But the big thing to keep in mind is the agent only has powers that are given in the document. A lot of people, again, are scared about, hey, what if something happens? They come, they, pull the plug, they do this, they steal my money, they sell my house. Well, guess what? You don't have to give that person all those powers. You can limit what powers you give to the person. You can sometimes in different scenarios, you may want to have more than one power of attorney. Hey, you handle all the business stuff, you handle all the retirement plan stuff, you handle all the real estate stuff. So there's a place for that. But the long and short of it is that if you really obviously you want to find someone you can trust, but if you have some thoughts in the back of your head, you can just say, hey, this person can do X, Y, Z, they can't do this. So that's the main thing to kind of think and to understand. But the biggest thing is that the POA is void when the principal dies. So once you die, the POA dies. I'll say that again. Once you die, the POA dies, because I've seen so many times clients that have gone to, and sometimes you get stupid people at banks and financial institutions, but they'll go and try to, hey, mom or dad passed away. We need to do this, we need to do that. They don't have any estate planning done. And the banker will ask for the POA, which is stupid because that person's dead. So POA is irrelevant. And sooner or later, it'll go up the food chain, and someone will be like, no, you need to have some beneficiary designation, trust, will, whatever in place. Otherwise, it's going to go through court. We'll talk about that. That's what we do. We'll go over that on other calls, and in our program, we learn about that. But the big thing to understand is that the POA dies when you die. Once you die, there is no more POA. It goes into beneficiary designations. So let's talk about abuse real quick. Again, this is a big thing that prevents people from taking this step. It's not always, hey, that person, just steals mom's money. and takes everything from them and sells their house. Sometimes it's, hey, that person, they just snuck in the family. They just snuck in. Maybe it was a long lost niece or nephew, and they're just saying, hey, how are things going? How you doing? Being sly and slick, and they slide in and say, sign this, sign that, and next thing you know, they've lost a whole bunch of money. So it comes in many different forms, and we can talk from here to the cows come home about different clients that we've seen
You're
and,
welcome.
and issues when it comes to that. But the reality is, abuse is a legitimate concern that people have, and it comes in different forms. So there are ways to prevent that, and it really boils down to how you have your POAs done. And so there are certain POA protections. Mainly, one of the biggest ones is what's called the Uniform Powers of Attorney Act. And that's why it's important that when you get these documents done, you get the right documents done, and you get documents that are going to be valid and honored and respected. And a lot of times when you're going on cheap online websites and things of that nature, it's really thin, it's really limited, and they don't cover a whole lot. So the Uniform Powers of Attorney Act compliant documents, basically the whole reason why it was set up was to deter financial abuse, right? To deter and stop people from even being able to abuse people in the first place. So it sets out fiduciary duties and things that that person has to comply with. And the biggest thing is that it provides for accountability. Because remember, the POA is a contract. It's a contract between two people. And in this country, contracts are basically ironclad. And no one can interfere, outside parties can't interfere with contracts. So once you make that POA, it goes into effect. It's a contract. That's that. But if it has, if it conforms with the Uniform Powers of Attorney Act, basically this gives interested parties, which could be children, siblings, an attorney, financial advisor, the authority to request accounting because they have to account for every dollar that's coming in and coming out, how you want your investments to go, things of that nature. So this allows someone to say, hey, if they don't think that person's doing the right job, or maybe they just want to audit it, they can request accounting without having to interfere with the contract. And it allows for a lot more protections, and it gives that person who's the attorney in fact the idea that, hey, if you do something wrong, guess what? You're personally liable for that abuse. So we're going to come after your personal assets if you do something that you're not supposed to do. So that's just something important to kind of understand. There are protections, there are different things you can do to make sure that no one abuses your POA. Married. Again, we get this a lot. People say, hey, I'm married. We've been together 20, 30, 40 years. We don't need a POA. We're good to go. Well, you would think. But when it comes to healthcare decisions, guess what? Unless you have the paperwork, it doesn't matter where you're the spouse. Okay. And again, that's when you start dealing with nurses and doctors every once in a while, maybe you might be able to skirt through. But once you deal with the bigger stuff, insurance companies, hospital administrators, they're going to ask you, do you have the paperwork? And then obviously you're going to have to deal with family arguments. So just get the paperwork done. It's ironclad, it's done. You don't have to worry about it. But even if you are married, if you have joint accounts, real estate that you own together, you're probably okay with that. Okay, because you both co-own 100% essentially those assets. But when it comes to other types of assets, mainly retirement accounts, 401ks, IRAs, and this is a big thing that we see a lot, husband or spouse or mom or dad gets injured or has an illness or accident or whatever, cognitive disorder, they need some money. Hey, let's go get into the retirement accounts. There's some money in the retirement accounts. We know we're going to pay the taxes, but we need the money. Guess what? You cannot touch that retirement account. Oh, but I'm a beneficiary. Okay, great. That beneficiary designation doesn't jump in until they die. Again, they're not dead yet, right? We're talking about what we do, how we protect assets while we're alive. We're incapacitated. We're not in the state that we're normally in, but we're still alive. So 401ks, IRAs, unless you have financial power of attorney, guess what? You're not going to be able to touch anything in that. Same thing for LLCs and corporations. You got stuff with the business or this or that. The spouse owns the business 100%. Do you have a power of attorney? Nope, nothing you can do. So even though you're married, that's fine. You still need to get these documents. And even again, we meet a lot of couples that are domestic partners, don't have traditional marriages. They still need to get these. It's even more important. LLCs and corporations. There are things within LLCs and corporations where you can set up a successor manager, different disability provisions. Hey, if this person's incapacitated, another one can step in place to handle things, but it's only for business matters, not for personal. So even if you've done this the right way and you've got everything set up with your LLCs, it's only for business matters and it's only for that particular entity. If you have five different LLCs, you need to make sure you have those successor management
Amani,
provisions set up
how
for
are you, man?
different um, LLCs. Um, and more importantly, the banks are still probably going to want to see a POA because banks don't really interfere when it comes to business entities and operating agreements. They kind of that's not their department. They're going to want to see the POA. So that's just something important to kind of understand. If you have a corporation or LLC, you still want to have that. Wills, trusts, uh, transfer on death, payable on death. Again, anything with a beneficiary designation, it only applies when you pass away. When you're alive, unless you have a POA or anything like that, you're not going to be able to touch anything in those accounts. Now, trusts are a little bit different because if you have a successor trustee, that successor trustee can step in for and manage trust accounts or things that are owned by that trust while you're incapacitated. But other than that, you're going to need a death certificate. So again, that person is not dead; they're alive; they're just incapacitated. You need to have financial healthcare power of attorneys. So these are all of the different documents. We went kind of in detail. I could have made this 3 hours, 4 hours long. Again, we try to crunch these things into an hour or less than that. So all of these are important things to have when it comes to authorization. So if you have these documents, again, when were they last reviewed? When were they last updated? And even if you got it done last year, how does your agent or your attorney, in fact, can they locate those documents? Because you could have everything done right, but if they can't access that piece of paper, they can't access those documents, it's as if it never existed. So making sure that they have a means of contact and accessing those documents is equally as important as actually having the documents themselves. So our process and one of our member benefits is access to attorney drafted, attorney reviewed, and attorney assigned legal, financial, healthcare, power of attorneys, letter of intents, all the documents that we described here. Now, this is available to pretty much every resident except for people that are residents of Louisiana. Because of how our program works, we have a network of attorneys across the country, but Louisiana is the exception because they practice Napoleonic law, and so it's a different process that we have to go through. We're still working on that. Hopefully, that'll be done in the next year or so, but as of right now, this can work in all 50 states except for Louisiana, so 49 states. But the documents all comply with the Uniform Powers of Attorney Act. You have unlimited updates. So again, you can update these things every year, and we recommend that. But sometimes people are, more, up on things. We have some people that are more analytical, and every time there's a life change, even if it happens within a year, they'll change it. So this allows you to do that and allows you to have cloud storage, so you can get the documents done, drafted by the attorney, reviewed, assigned, and then you can put it on the cloud for your agent, attorney, in fact, to have access to it, even if they're in California or New York or whatever. So it's just a really cool program that we put together, and it's a benefit that people in the T program have access to. If you're in the T program already and you haven't done this, you need to set up a call with me or Michelle and get this done because it's super easy. It takes about 15 minutes. But if you're not, we recommend you join our T program so that you can get access to this and a whole bunch of other resources like our training sessions that we have every Tuesday. We have different workshops that we do. We have lots of different tools and resources. strategy library. You get to speak to such subject matter experts, CPAs, attorneys. We're going to have a lot of them on our calls in the upcoming weeks and a lot more. So if you are not part of the Tax and Estate Academy, we highly encourage you to do that. Super easy. Again, 97 bucks a year. All you have to do is text T, the word TEA, to the number that you see here on the screen. And I will drop that in the comments as well. But it's super simple, super easy to join. We'd love for you to be a part of the community, to learn more, to network with other business owners, investors, and entrepreneurs, and to learn how to start implementing some of these advanced strategies to protect yourself, protect your family, and leave a legacy for generations to come. So that's pretty much it. We do have some upcoming calls and workshops. We're going to be going over the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, but we're going to simplify it. So there's a lot of provisions in that that people are not aware of that are super beneficial for investors and business owners. But we've broken it down to a very simple, easy to understand way. We're going to have a call on how to recover overpaid taxes. This is really, really cool strategy that we learned last year. So if you have any if you're yourself or if you know of anyone that overpaid taxes, that paid over $100,000 in taxes in either 2024, 2023, or 2022, we can show them how to get money back from the government in a matter of a few weeks. We're going to talk about high income college funding strategies. So if you have a lot of income and you have kids going to college, you're probably not going to get financial aid, but there are tax strategies that you can implement and there are different ways that you can reduce your income right now, especially if you have kids that are in their sophomore year or going into their junior year, to reduce your income so that you can potentially qualify for financial aid at some of these private colleges and universities. So we're going to be going over that. Partnerships and S Corp alternatives. We're going to talk about the Dynasty Trust Intensive. That's going to be really, really deep and to for people that have been on our calls or watched some of our trainings online on our YouTube page about the Dynasty Trust. We're going to be going deep into kind of how the Dynasty Trust works, legal aspect, tax aspect, so you can really understand how this works and implement it right away. So
I have a
that's
question coming in from a live stream, Stefan.
okay.
Do powers of attorney have to be local and do they cross state lines? Financial power of attorney and healthcare power of attorneys, do they cross state lines?
Yeah, so good question. So with the Uniform Powers of Attorney Act, that was one of the benefits of it is that you can have powers of attorney. Let's say you live in Florida, you can work with our system. We can get your powers of attorney drafted in Florida because they are statutory, but they will be honored in Georgia or New York or California or whatever. So that's one of the things that's beneficial from that act and why you want to have make sure you have a Uniform Powers of Attorney Act compliant documents.
Okay.
So, good question. Any other questions? Anyone going once, going
You have to
twice?
unmute yourself if you're
Yes, please.
if
Yeah,
you're
unmute
talking, please
yourself.
unmute yourself. I don't see any.
I got another one from live stream. Can you explain how the POA works with LLCs? Yeah. So again, if you have an LLC or corporation, um, again, you set that up, you're a single member LLC or a single owner of that corporation. You can control everything in that corporation, right? But if you don't have the right provisions set up, the what the powers of attorney is going to do is going to allow someone else that you designate to say, hey, even though you're not a member of that LLC with our corporation, they can still handle affairs on behalf of the business. So it's not like you have to make them a member or have them be a shareholder of that corporation or that LLC, but it allows them to be able to facilitate and make business decisions like, again, paying vendors, paying employees, going into the business bank accounts and records and stuff to facilitate. Again, you want to choose someone who you feel can do that and is up for the job, but that's what it allows them to do. So it doesn't give them control over your business. Um, Yeah, no, yeah, you said thanks. Yeah, I know that's what you were probably alluding to. So yeah, that it doesn't give them, hey, now they can take over your business, but allows them to be able to work on your behalf while you're incapacitated. So hopefully that answers your question. Any other questions? Was this helpful? Clinton said thank you. All right, awesome. All right, so that's it for our Tea Tuesday session. Hope you guys had a good session. This recording will be our um, in our T portal, and we'll also load it up to YouTube as well. But please join the T program, learn more about all these different things, and get this stuff done. Only 97 bucks for the year, and you can get healthcare, financial power of attorney, living will, all these different things done not only for yourself, but everyone in your family, your kids. I mean, it's a no-brainer. And you get to network and get to meet cool people like myself and a lot of our other members. So that is pretty much it. If you have any questions, again, don't hesitate to reach out. Uh, Hit me up on Instagram or
Stefan, I have one more question coming in.
yeah.
They're asking, how much does it cost to update or change? And is there a fee if I want to change it each year? Like if I need to
No.
update?
No, there isn't. That's one of the cool things about it. So once you join, you get access to the portal. We'll show you how the portal works. Again, the call to we usually like to set up around 30 minutes to get all that stuff done. But we'll show you how to use the portal and how to update the documents. It's super simple and user friendly. But you can make as many changes as you want, and there are no additional fees or anything like that.
Okay, great. Unlike going to a lawyer where you pay by the
Yes,
hour.
yeah.
So it's a
You're
good,
paying by the
it's a good
hour.
deal.
You
It's a
want
good
to
deal.
you breathe, they're going to charge you. And yeah, so good question.
Okay, that's it. That's it from here.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.